When a hardcore diaper furry with a rebellious attitude started to get more into politics, he came to despise certain communities out there. After ranting about his hatred of these people for years, he could no longer control himself when they showed up right across the street from his home. Here we have yet another story about a furry, this time being about one who is interested in some other types of play as well. Interestingly enough, he even has connections to another lolcow out there, one who had very similar interests to him. Before I go ahead and spoil everything, let's start back at the beginning of the story. Benjamin Jeffrey Smith was born on November 28, 1978 in Concord, Massachusetts. From a young age, he was fairly close to his cousin. His cousin would come to say that Ben was always a bit of a problem, though. As far back as he could remember, Ben was always a bit of a rascal when it came to authority. In 1991, when Ben was about 13 years old, what would become the catalyst for the LA riots had taken place. Rodney King had been beaten by the police, and Ben took it very hard. Even at that young age, he wanted to protest in his own way. Given that there wasn't much he could do at that young age, he decided to protest by refusing to stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance in school. Not all of what Ben did came from a sense of justice, though, not by a long shot. His cousin also remembered an incident that took place when Ben was a teenager. After the neighbor's dog chased him around while he was riding his motorcycle, Ben flew into a rage, turned around, and tried to run over the dog. Luckily, he wasn't successful. Still, his cousin worried, asking him if he thought that was an appropriate response. Ben responded with, "I just don't care sometimes." After coming into adulthood, Ben moved out to the Portland, Oregon area and took up a new hobby, that being becoming a furry. He started to call himself Polybun, or sometimes Polyhead online, using a cartoon rabbit as his new avatar. He was one of the original founders of an IRC chat, #BabyFur, which was a roleplay channel for baby furs. For those of you who haven't heard, a baby fur is a furry that also enjoys roleplaying as a baby and sometimes even wearing diapers. It was during this tenure as a baby fur that Ben, or Polybun, came to meet with a particularly infamous character, that being Pamperchew. Pamperchew is a nightmare of a lolcow that was also living in Oregon. Pamperchew is a baby fur who is known for roaming around town and taking dirty diapers from other people's trash cans in order to take them home and enjoy them. With this being the kind of person that Ben decided he wanted to keep his company, the two came to build a friendship that would last almost 20 years. While holding mainly leftist views as a teen, Ben did a complete 180 and started to deep dive into the other side of politics as an adult. He started making an attempt to dress and behave more manly, taking up an interest in classic cars and muscle cars. With this came a shift in his politics, going much more to the right this time. You may remember a past video where I introduced the oddity that is Nazi furries. Nazi furries, sometimes called the Third Reich, are a real group. Actually, they form multiple different groups under different names, but the ideology is basically the same across the board. Some of them go as far as wearing Nazi uniforms, even down to little red armbands with paw prints on them instead of swastikas. They have been growing in numbers over time, with the more apolitical furries coming to despise them. Ben took a big interest in these groups, given that he had developed quite a big hatred of Jews. He started taking place in a chat that he referred to as Free For All, but this chat usually tended to be called NaziCon by other furries out there. As early as back in 2006, the FBI took notice of Ben's presence online, very likely due to his neo-Nazi associations. Things were made even worse later on when Ben fully expressed his desire that the Proud Boys would commit some sort of massive attack. In 2010, Ben came to be involved with the law a couple of times. At one point, he faced some charges related to a robbery, getting hit with charges of both theft and burglary. In another incident, he was convicted of criminal mischief and harassment. This very well may have been in relation to an incident later described by another furry within his circle named Triss Winters. She wrote, "I had to throw Ben Smith/Polybun out of my house during a party for trying to brandish a knife and threatening to stab someone just because they took his picture. He was that sort of unhinged, and it only got way worse since then." Wanting to make more of a name for himself as a furry, Ben made his own website at polyhead.net, one that he called, "Who the hell is Polyhead?" On it, he described himself with this statement, "It's kind of a pain in the ass question to answer, really. I guess tinkerer would describe me best. Maybe also revolutionist. Maybe forward thinker. Maybe fucking asshole works as well. Matt adds cute. I don't know. I want to get this over as quickly as possible and get to more important things." Matt, by the way, was a man that he was dating at the time. He included a bunch of pictures of himself and Matt that, either fortunately or unfortunately, have been lost to time. In some of the pictures, he labeled himself as being scruffy and sexy, and writing, "Oh, I look like a proper Bishonen in this one" on another, with a Bishonen being a beautiful anime boy. Ben also had a live journal, one where he posted using his furry character. On it, he only ever posted 8 entries. Given that Ben had become quite the edgy internet atheist, 2 of the entries only consisted of links to YouTube videos against Christianity. In another, he posted a record of an IRC chat about Doctor Who. This one is interesting because apparently the topic of the chat was listed as, putting it in a more YouTube-friendly way, "We engage in intercourse with kids. Herrick fucks dogs." This Herrick apparently changed the topic to spoilers, a much more normal decision. Ben got angry and changed it back to the previous topic before criticizing Herrick for abusing his operator powers by changing the topic to something else. It's worth noting that, on his website, Ben also listed Shinji from Evangelion as a cute character he would consider dating. Shinji is both drawn as and labeled as a young boy. Ben came to be a machinist, living in his apartment across from Normandale Park in Portland for about 14 years. Getting up into his 40s, his online extremism only continued to grow. Online, he would often rant about Black Lives Matter and Antifa in situations where it was completely unprompted and pretty irrelevant. Over time, the city of Portland started leaning more and more heavily towards the left. Given Ben's views, he didn't like that very much. He would typically get angry whenever he saw any homeless people or protests taking place within the city. His former roommate, a woman named Christine that he let stay with him for free, said that she didn't really see the signs at first. She said, "When I first moved in, he seemed fine. He was actually not that bad of a guy." However, during the Obama administration, Ben started to become much more vocal with his views. This only intensified during the Trump administration and then flew into overdrive during the Biden administration. Ben was very into COVID conspiracy theories and adamantly opposed the wearing of masks. Over time, Christine came to hear him yelling at nobody in particular in his bedroom, usually with a lot of racial slurs and hatred towards women sprinkled about. Christine added, "As the years went on, he's just gotten more and more radicalized. He's gotten angrier and angrier. I have not been comfortable living with him for a while. I did not feel safe with him, especially this last 2 years with the whole COVID thing. I think that made him even more angry. He talked about wanting to go shoot commies and Antifa all the friggin' time. He was just a sad, angry dude. He was angry at the mask mandates, he was angry at the damned liberals." At some point during the COVID lockdowns, Ben joined the White Rose channel on Telegram, a channel known for trolling and spreading COVID misinformation and Q-type conspiracies. Ben would rant about communists, saying that they aren't human, so it's okay to kill them. He also said that protests do nothing and that extreme violence is the only way to be heard. He was known to drop quite a bit of hard R's, saying that he hated racially motivated protests in particular. On that chat, he was also prone to chime in any time that he found he could tie Jews to whatever was being mentioned. On October 18th, 2021, he posted in response to someone talking about a funeral, saying, "Did someone say cremate? Are we burning Jews today?" Again, on September 9th, he posted, "Christianity is a Jewish invention designed to control Gentiles." Ben, still in periodic contact with his cousin, would message him on Facebook Messenger from time to time. In 2021, the two of them got into a small argument that Ben reacted to in a very over-the-top sort of way. The cousin had said something vaguely political that Ben didn't like, so Ben called him an idiot. When the cousin didn't retract his statement, Ben flew into a rage. The cousin said, "His usual expectation was when he calls you an idiot, you back down, and when I didn't, that's when he completely went off. The specific threat was, he said I was a fascist and that people like him are going to put a fascist like me up against a wall one of these days. He's like, I got the time for a road trip and you've got one incoming." This cousin ended up reporting the incident to the police, but they didn't take the claim very seriously and hadn't ended up doing anything about it. Ben, now 43 years old, also had a Reddit account, one where his posts mainly revolved around things like Burning Man, classic cars, and random other topics that interested him. It seems that Ben had attended Burning Man and made a bit of an ass of himself. In his post, he swears that he was a badass before starting fights with other users and getting heavily downvoted on nearly every reply he made. Some of Ben's more recent posts were in response to a shooting at Portland's Cathedral Park, which seems to be more or less a common occurrence. This one appears to have been in relation to a drug deal gone wrong. Ben was in one of the bars in the area when he heard the shots being fired, which he said sounded like someone hitting the wall with a hammer. Forgetting about the shooting itself, Ben then accused hipsters of ruining the bars in the area and making it worse for everybody. Some of Ben's very last posts consisted of a rant about anime thighs being censored in a music video on a subreddit called McVirgins, a rant where he yet again insulted other users. You can't make this stuff up. His last post was made on February 10th, 2021. This was because soon after, he would come to fly off the handle in a way that he could never recover from. After dark on Saturday, February 19th, 2022, a protest was forming near the southwest corner of Normandale Park across from where Ben lived. This protest was a Justice for Amir Locke protest, with Amir having been a black man that was killed by the police in Minneapolis. There had actually already been many of these protests held throughout the Portland area leading up to this point, but this one was close to Ben, something that he couldn't stomach. That night, there were a few people redirecting traffic so that the protesters could start a march. Meanwhile, they were all gathered with their signs on the side of the park. Ben, seeing all of this, stormed out of his apartment and started yelling slurs towards the crowd. Several people at the protest asked for Ben to leave them alone and go back to his apartment. Ben responded with the classic line, "Oh yeah, make me," puffed out his chest, and approached one of the protesters. When Ben put his face in theirs, this protester pushed him back. That's when Ben truly flew into a rage and started screaming at the protesters before pulling out a handgun. When someone slowly approached him with their arms out, urging him to put his gun down, Ben started to fire. He wildly began firing his gun into the crowd of protesters, hitting 5 of them. The split-second shooting ended when another protester, armed with his own gun, shot Ben in the hip. Ben fired back at him, injuring him as well before collapsing to the ground. The police arrived on scene shortly after and closed off all the local streets. They found 8 spent shell casings matching Ben's handgun at the scene, along with 1 from a rifle, likely from the man who shot him. Sadly, it was found that one of the victims, June Knightley, a 60-year-old woman, had died right then and there. A veteran of the protest scene in Portland, she had been to countless events like this, but never one that escalated to such violence. She had been hit in the head at very close range and had no chance of surviving. Another woman, known only as Deg, had been hit in the neck and paralyzed from the neck down. Later in the hospital, she opted to be removed from her ventilator. She passed away shortly after, bringing the death toll up to 2. 3 other people in total were injured by the gunshots and rushed off to nearby hospitals. Ben himself was also taken to the hospital in serious condition. For now, he was left to recover as the police pieced together what had happened. At first, the police came to report that the shooting had aggressors on both sides, saying that the whole thing stemmed from a confrontation between an armed homeowner and a bunch of armed protesters. This was pretty misleading, as Ben did not own his home, and while one of the protesters was armed, the others weren't. After critics of the local police came to speak out, the police did change up their statement a little bit, instead calling Ben an armed area resident, but not really changing much else. Some felt that this was made to be intentionally misleading, leading to a lot of controversy. Teresa Rayford, executive director of Don't Shoot Portland, felt that this was part of a pattern, saying, "I believe that it was to entice vigilantism. I can't think of anything else that could occur from that type of misreporting or misinformation." The investigation was pretty tough to carry out. Due to the chaos, the crime scene wasn't in good condition, with a lot of the evidence having been removed. The police commissioner, Joanne Hardesty, said, "While we need more information about what transpired, I can say that protesting for racial justice should never endanger those exercising their First Amendment rights." The mayor of Portland, Ted Wheeler, said, "While many of the details of last night's shooting near Normandale Park are unclear, we do know one thing for sure. Our community is dealing with the sadness of another senseless act of gun violence." The police made their way out to Ben's apartment and raided the place. In doing so, they found a whole lot of other guns and ammunition that he owned. Many people came out to rally in support of June Knightley, holding a memorial for her in the same Normandale Park not too long after the shooting. Many of her friends, though, said that they felt the shooting was predictable, given all the political polarization and clashes between protests on the left and right in the city of Portland alone. Tris Winters, the furry who previously kicked Ben out of her party in the 2010s, wrote on Twitter, "Just to reiterate for the furry part of my crowd, Portland local furry, Polybun/Ben Smith, was the perpetrator of the mass shooting at a leftist-related march event Saturday night that left 1 dead and 5 wounded. Rumors started coming around a couple hours ago that are confirmed. Pamperchew, Ben's old diaper bro, decided to shout him out in a video in which he downplayed the situation."
Now, to conclude this video, I wanted to say I am a friend of Benjamin Jeffrey Smith, the guy who just shot a bunch of people in Portland. Yeah, we've been friends for 16 years. You know, I know he killed somebody. He's my friend. I know him. I know that's who he is. Just glad it wasn't me. I know it's kind of that's mean to say. That's mean to say. Glad it wasn't me. But you know, I'm gonna pick up the diapers. You know, you gotta pick them up once in a while.
The city of Portland continued to have a lot of difficulty getting accurate information from witnesses, as there was a lot of hearsay, differing stories, and the whole thing was basically just a political minefield. Those on the left said that they were being doxxed and harassed in the aftermath of the shooting and that the police weren't doing anything to help them out with that. The police said that people had removed shell casings and other evidence from the scene and that they were having a hard time communicating with a bunch of people who didn't really like them. Eventually, though, one witness came to share a GoPro camera recording of the incident with the police, one that provided both audio and video of the shooting. While the police couldn't speak publicly on what the motive in the shooting was, it was clear who the aggressor had been. While Ben was still in the hospital, the district attorney announced that they would be hitting him with 9 charges related to the attack. These were 1 count of second-degree murder with a firearm, 4 counts of second-degree attempted murder with a firearm, 2 counts of first-degree assault with a firearm, and 2 counts of second-degree assault with a firearm. While he was still in the hospital, Ben wasn't able to afford an attorney and was provided with a court-appointed lawyer instead. He appeared on a video call while the court began to review the case. The jury came to hear from 12 witnesses throughout late February and early March. When all was said and done, the jury decided that Ben was indeed the aggressor and voted to indict him. Ben came to survive and, while recovering at the hospital, was formally arrested. The armed protester who shot him was similarly arrested. Ben was removed from the hospital and booked into jail on March 23, 2022, about a month after the shooting. The man who shot him, though, had all of his charges dropped shortly after. In a court hearing the very next day, Ben came to plead not guilty to all the charges against him. For the time being, he was to be held in a Multnomah County jail facility without bail. His trial was then scheduled to take place roughly a year later in April of 2023. Before that April came about, Ben decided to plead guilty to second-degree murder, 4 counts of attempted murder, 3 counts of first-degree assault, and 1 more count of second-degree assault shortly before the trial was all set to begin. This made the trial itself redundant, so the sentencing was scheduled for April 18th. On that day, Ben came to be sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 55 years. He was carted off to prison, all set to spend the remaining portion of his life at the Snake River Correctional Institution in Oregon. In January of 2025, about 3 years after the shooting, the police chief in Portland, Bob Day, decided to put out a formal apology for publishing the inaccurate details about the case originally. He said that the police had originally thought the shooter was a homeowner and found that that was not the case, that they found the victims were indeed unarmed, and that they should have clarified that the attack was unprovoked. To this day, Ben still remains in prison at Snake River. He will probably never get out, being that he would be either 99 or 100 years old by the time his parole even came around. Surprisingly, his Reddit account remains up to view to this very day, unlike a lot of many other cases in which Reddit scrubs every shred of their involvement with the criminal. Once again, thank you for watching my video. If you found the topic interesting, please give it a like, it really helps me out in the algorithm, and feel free to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Recently, I have opened up a merch store that you can get yourself a t-shirt if you don't have any shirts already. If you want, go ahead and follow me on social media. If you ever need to get a hold of me in any way, that's the easiest way to do it. I also really appreciate when people subscribe to me on Patreon. There you can get videos early, ad-free, and uncensored. Channel memberships are up too, and you can get the same benefits there as well. Once again, this has been your host Kyle. Thank you, and good night.